So it finally happened. You got caught illegally downloading the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy because a certain streaming service only has the theatrical versions and not the far superior director's cuts. Even more bad news, the judge is the third cousin of Peter Jackson's personal chef's dog walker and is really throwing the book at you. For your minor cybercrimes, you were given a sentence of 2 years in prison. You've already served a few months, except you're not actually holed up in a brick-and-mortar prison, you're at home with a headset on. For 10 hours a day, you have to wear a headset and serve time in a virtual prison. You're probably thinking that this is some futuristic nonsense, but keep listening, because virtual prisons may well be coming to a judicial system near you. Okay, so as you know, because you've watched all of our other prison shows, the USA locks up more people per capita than any other country by a long way. This country is a specialist at incarceration, an unbeatable Olympian in the race to have more people behind bars. Before we get to the reality of virtual prison, you have to hear some facts first, and then you might understand why virtual incarceration is being taken seriously right now. As you watch this, there are something like 2.3 million folks in the US doing time, but around 2/3 of those people are locked up for non-violent crimes. Around 850,000 people are in prison or jail for assault, murder, sexual assault, manslaughter, and robbery, all counted as violent crimes. 612,000 people are in local jails, although 462,000 of them haven't even been convicted yet. They're innocent until proven guilty, or as some of our dear viewers have said in the comments section, more like guilty until proven innocent. Many of those people just can't afford to pay the bail money, so the poor folks lose out big time. About 500,000 prisoners in the US are in for drug possession. Something like 60,000 youths under the age of 18 are locked up in some way or under house arrest. Okay, so you get the picture, but we also need to tell you that the ever-increasing number of for-profit private prisons in the US have quotas. They need inmates, and most of the contracts ask for 80 to 100% occupancy. The largest private prison outfit is the Corrections Corporation of America, and in 2012 it told the governors of 48 states that it would take over some public prisons, but the governors had to guarantee a 90% occupancy rate. In 2018, around 8% of prisoners were in private prisons. You, the taxpayer, foot the bill for all those prisoners. It's not a small bill. As for how much it costs to lock someone up for a year in the US, it depends on where they are, but it's between $30,000 and $60,000 per prisoner. The entire system costs you guys $80 billion a year. In the UK, it's even more expensive to pay for a prisoner, with the cost of imprisoning someone for a year closer to $90,000. So for all that cash, do prisoners come out good guys, totally rehabilitated and ready to start a new life? Not really. Around 44% of US prisoners will be back in jail or prison within a year. About 68% will be back in 3 years, and about 77% will be back in 5 years. That's why the officers often joke about the revolving door, and why prisoners talk about prison only as being crime school. Okay, so we know we've been a bit stat heavy here, but you need to know why so many people in the US, including some politicians, are screaming out for prison reform. But how do you change the system? Well, let's imagine that those folks in for minor offenses or drug offenses, the people who don't pose too much of a problem to society, don't actually go to so-called crime school. They don't have to follow that confounding prison code, get beaten up, or be traumatized in solitary confinement. What some people are now saying is that these people shouldn't be going to prison, a place they'll likely return to. The future might see these guys being held under house arrest, wearing an electronic tag with GPS built into it. That costs around $9 a day, and there will have to be supervision and a monitoring system, but you gotta remember that they're confined to their home, and people can still visit them. They could still be involved in crime. All this will cost money, but it will still be cheaper than prison, say some analysts. That's not just because prisoners cost so much to look after, but as you know, the Department of Corrections needs to pay for the upkeep of prisons, pay for its officers and its admin, its planes and other transport vehicles, etc. So let's say you've got some guy who's doing time at home for burglary or selling pills to his friends. He's being tagged and can't leave the house. He's monitored, visited at times for someone responsible for his home incarceration, and he also has to be in a virtual prison for a good part of the day. In the virtual prison, he is not in solitary climbing the walls or smearing the door with his own excrement. He's not feeling paranoid in the yard or occasionally having to see someone get their face slashed. He's not following any kind of brutal Catch-22 prison code. He might actually be virtually working as a car mechanic. Or maybe he's learning coding, maybe he's taking English classes, he's getting a virtual education. Okay, so what if he's having mental issues? Well, in that case, he goes to a virtual therapy class. If he has drug addiction problems, he gets virtual counseling. Maybe for some part of the day he really does have to sit in a virtual prison cell just to give him a taste of prison. Okay, so many of you are now screaming at the screen saying, who are these idealistic hippie fools who believe this could happen? Hey, don't shoot the messenger, guys. Those people who believe this might work do see problems. What if the prisoner just goes out of the house and commits another crime? That's a big possibility. What if the prisoner refuses to wear his headset and do his virtual time? What if he doesn't attend his classes? The answer, we guess, is they go to real prison. But let's also remember this: the vast majority of repeat offenders have lived a life that consisted of trauma, neglect, and abuse. Scientists are also saying that many violent offenders have suffered a traumatic brain injury as children, and many of them suffer from mental illnesses due to some other emotional trauma in childhood. They kinda need fixing. And as Robert Sapolsky said in his groundbreaking neuroscience book, Behave, maybe we need to rethink the justice system and stop thinking it's virtuous to put people behind bars. That's where virtual reality comes in again. Those violent offenders might have to stay in a real prison, but perhaps virtual reality can support them, give them counseling, give them an education. We should say some folks think plugging in prisoners to headsets to change them sounds dystopian, just like the story of a guy named Alex in the novel and movie A Clockwork Orange. And we should say we don't think violent re-education is what supporters of prison reform are saying should happen. Right now, some prisons actually are using virtual reality headsets to help long-term prisoners about to be released. They might use virtual ATM cards, walk down a virtual modern street, use a computer, or order a taxi. You must remember, long-term institutionalized prisoners often return to prison because they just can't cope with the outside. So, does this work? This is how one program coordinator put it. With social workers on hand for support, the VR lessons are reinforced with classroom instruction. Participants wear the VR headset and control virtual hands to complete tasks. The graphics are not photorealistic, but nonetheless evoke strong emotions from prisoners who have spent decades behind bars. One guy started crying after a VR session. He couldn't believe how much the world had changed. The hope now is that these sessions will drastically reduce the recidivism rate. Even the Federal Bureau of Prisons is interested after hearing reports that VR can help prisoners not only with education, but also emotional stress. The program ran at another prison, and the coordinator said this in an interview: an offender can practice simple tasks like doing laundry, to difficult social skills such as dealing with family or job conflicts. The impact of 360-degree immersion is powerful in a way that other education and training platforms lack. If you think this is not important, just imagine this. If you're old enough, imagine you went to prison in the 90s, close to the time when Meatloaf was singing "I'd Do Anything for Love" and Kurt Cobain's head was still intact. The world wasn't that smart back then in terms of technology. You had no smartphones, we just weren't all connected. It was a totally different world. Now imagine that 1993 you was just released from prison. Imagine the shock you'd feel, the anxiety. That's why VR is helping those long stayers. You might be thinking that this sounds too expensive, and why should prisoners get a VR headset when you can't afford one? Well, the people promoting this stuff believe in the end it will reduce the cost to the taxpayer, but better, it might make your streets safer. It will be expensive at first. To make virtual reality, you have to film all the locations, you have to make those classes and have virtual classrooms. You need to create many new worlds. Just to create one certain VR program for young offenders, it costs the Department of Corrections $20,000 to run the program and a further $180,000 for all the filming and equipment. Could VR be the future in terms of rehabilitating people inside a brick-and-mortar prison? Or could VR and house arrest be the solution to the USA's shameful prison population and recidivism rates? Some people really think there's a chance this could work. A US professor who studies the mental health effects of prison confinement thinks it could help inside prisons. She said, "You don't realize how much the brain has gone dormant when you put people in an artificial environment that constrains their choices and limits their sensory information." She believes VR could help the brains of prisoners develop, giving them challenges, putting them in situations where they have to use that prefrontal cortex of theirs to make the right choices. This is called rehabilitation, something quite different from crime school or the literal torture of solitary confinement. In Europe, some countries are using VR to prevent drug addicts in prison going back into the streets and getting hooked again. The VR experience reinforces new behavior and deals with cravings. And this is important. Look at a country like the UK, a huge consumer of drugs per capita, a veritable world leader. When we're talking about drug-related crime, not just selling drugs or taking drugs, but anything related to drugs, you're looking at a huge part of the prison population in the UK. Alcohol addiction itself is responsible for multitudes of crimes, from crashing cars to having fights to just making bad decisions like shoplifting or scraping a key down someone's car. Some people are hoping that this new VR technology can treat addiction and so lower the rate of recidivism. We should also say any prisoner will tell you that drugs and even alcohol can easily be purchased in prison, that drugs just cost more, which means more debt, more problems, and so maybe VR could help the addicts inside still buying their fix. So VR may help those inside in the future with mental health issues or those who need to educate themselves. It might provide those who've done long stretches of prison time some confidence for when they enter a new world. It might save those in solitary from losing their minds, but it will be costly. But the $80 billion question is, could house arrest and virtual prison work for those who have committed nonviolent offenses? You have to ask that question and then think about the kid we talked about at the beginning. He just wanted to take a pill with his friends that releases a flood of serotonin hormones in the brain. So those guys will dance all night, look a bit weird, and tell everyone they love them. If that kid goes to prison, there's a good chance he'll go back. He might even join a gang in there or make some bad decisions inside. Do you think virtual prison would be better for him? You have to think about the traumatized children who later use drugs to reduce their anxiety or the poor kids who turn to shoplifting. Will prison really improve those people as it is now? The statistics say no. In fact, they say it will make them worse. And you, dear viewers, you are paying for their incarceration. You'll also pay for the second time they go back and for the third time, and well, that's 3 strikes. And someone who's never been that much of a menace to society could now be looking at serious time. And again, you'll be footing the bill. Now go watch a video about Britain's so-called most violent prisoner, the man so violent, even other prisoners fear him. And then watch why prisoner proven innocent can't be released.